and the second is the cut vertices of the graph, right? Why do I call them the color classes? Because a bipartite graph is simply a graph that is two colorable, right? So this is, you can think of this as one color, and this is the second color, right? Color 1, color 2. Okay, so in general, when I say color classes of a bipartite graph, that is what I mean. Okay, good. So each block, so okay, so vertex 1 is incident with B1 and B2. So I'm going to put these two edges. Vertex 2 is incident with B2 and B3. Vertex 3 is incident with B3 and B4. Vertex 4 has B4, B5, and B6. And vertex 5 is B6 and B7. Okay. So that's called the block tree of a graph. Is it clear why this is a tree? Can anybody tell me why this is a tree? Why should this be a tree? Why can't there be any cycle? Anyone? No? I'll give you a hint. The hint is here. What would happen if there is a cycle in the bipartite graph we constructed?
Sir, there will be one block adjacent to two cut vertices if there is a cycle, and that is not possible.
Okay, yes, that is one way to look at it. Another way to think about it is that if there is a cycle in this graph, let's say B1, V1, V2, V2, then what you can do is you can get a cycle in the original graph that will go through both of these blocks. Because inside the block you can find a path, and inside this block you can find a path. So that is actually an exercise. So if there is a cycle in this graph, then you will be able to find a cycle in the original graph G that will be contained in statement 3. We have proved, or it was supposed to be an exercise, that each cycle is contained in precisely one block of the graph. Okay. So cycle cannot be part of two blocks, right? So you won't get any cycles, and that is why this is going to be a tree. Okay. So there are algorithms to compute the block decomposition also. I am not going to cover any of these algorithms. Chances are that some of you saw such an algorithm if you took a course in algorithms or in graph theory. But anyways, I'm not going to cover this algorithm. It is, however, going to be part of a reading assignment. But I mean, that is up to you, right? I mean, I expect you to read the paper. So I'll tell you about that in a few minutes. Before that, I want to ask two questions. And I'm going to call out names, okay? So be prepared. These are supposed to be reasonably easy questions. Let's see. Amit Saxena, are you there? Amit, are you there? Tarun Kumar, are you there? Hi. Okay, so the question is, if G is a two connected graph, what is the block tree of this graph? Supposing your graph is two connected, then you are saying that the block tree is exactly the same graph. You are on the right direction. Remember that the block tree should have one vertex for each block. and should have one vertex for each cut vertex. Do you want to change your answer? Yeah, so what would the block tree be? You are right, there is no cut vertex. So what would the block tree be? How many blocks are there in the graph? It will be a single vertex, exactly. So if G is a two connected graph, then the graph G is the only block of G and there is no cut vertex. So the block tree of the graph will exactly be K1. K1 means just a single vertex. That's your whole graph. Okay. So that is good. Next question. Manogni, are you there? Manognia, are you there? Pappu, are you there? Pappu Kumar, are you there? Okay. Suhas Pai, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if G is a connected graph with exactly one cut vertex, then what is the block tree of the graph? What does it look like?
So you'll have like two components. You have one vertex in the middle and two components on either side of it.
One vertex in the middle and two components. Okay, that is one possibility. Are you sure? So these are the two blocks you are saying, block 1, block 2.
Yeah.
And this is your cut vertex. Are you sure that this is the only possibility?
Okay, let me think. I'm not able to think of any other examples.
No? Okay, anybody else wants to say anything? Tarun
Yeah.
Kumar says, Ritvik, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, K1, comma N, like there could be N
K1,
vertices.
comma N, right. K1, comma N. You could have as many blocks as you like, and you could have a single cut vertex. K1, comma N. It's a complete bipartite graph with one vertex on one side and n vertices on the other side, where n is going to be greater than equal to 1. Right? For example, your graph could be this. Okay. So do you see why, Suhas, this is also possible?
Yeah. There's no
Right?
restriction on the number of blocks.
Exactly.
It's
So
just
in a cut edge, exactly. So that's one difference between a cut edge and a cut vertex. When you remove a cut edge from a graph, you will get exactly two components.
component. Yeah.
But when you remove a cut vertex from a graph, you could get 1,000 components.
True.
Right? Okay. Good. Any questions? Is everybody clear about the answers to these two questions? Shefali, you have a question?
Yeah, question number
Yeah.
1. I
Yeah.
didn't understand that.
Okay. So remember, if your graph is already two connected, right? Supposing your graph is this graph. Okay. This is already two connected. So what are the blocks of this graph, Shefali? If this is my graph G, the
Yeah.
graph is already two connected. What are the blocks of this graph?
I think this will contain only one block because
Exactly.
we cannot take triangle. It will not be maximum.
Exactly. This is exactly one block. So in my block tree graph, how many vertices will be there?
4.
Think about that again. Remember, for every
Okay.
block in a graph, you have
Okay.
exactly one vertex. So there are 7 blocks here.
Right.
So in the block tree graph, you have 7 vertices on one side.
Yeah.
And for every cut vertex, you will have one vertex. So how many cut vertices are there in this graph?
0.
No, this one, the
Oh
one
no,
I've drawn
this
here,
one.
the one you
This
see.
one. Okay, yeah, there are
5.
5.
Right? So you
Yeah.
get 12 vertices. Now let's go back to the graph I drew here. How many cut vertices are there in this graph?
0. Because
0. So there is one block and there is 0 cut vertices. So now what is
Yeah.
the block tree of the graph?
there will be only one single block.
There will be a single
No
vertex for one
vertices.
block.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So that is why the answer is K1. Good.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So in other words, just to clarify, the block tree is useful only when your graph is not too connected, right? I mean, otherwise it doesn't give you any information. Okay. Good. So, okay. So I just want to say some few words about history of this, the things we have been studying. And you can go and look at the papers. You can read the history on Wikipedia or any other source. So open ear decompositions were introduced in 1933 by Hassler Whitney. And actually, Whitney did a lot of amazing work on graph theory and also in matroid theory, which is a generalization of graphs. But we won't be discussing that in this course. So that is where he introduced open ear decompositions for two vertex connected graphs. Okay. And ear decompositions for two edge connected graphs actually came later, 1939, Herbert Robbins. And his paper has an interesting title, A Problem, a Theorem in Graph Theory with Applications to Traffic Control. So the paper was actually motivated by a traffic control problem. Okay. So that is how he introduced ear decompositions for two edge connected graphs. On the algorithmic side, there is a lot of history. I won't go into that. But I will tell you about the paper that I want you all to read. There is a paper by Jens Schmidt, which I've already put on Moodle. What it does is this: he gives an algorithm which runs in order m, which is order n squared in the worst case. It takes as input any graph and does all of the following. It will conclude that the graph is two edge connected, or otherwise it will find all of the cut edges of the graph. It will conclude the graph is two vertex connected, and in this case it will give an ear decomposition in the edge connected case. Here it will give you an open ear decomposition, or it will find all of the cut vertices of the graph. Okay. And finally, using the algorithm, he doesn't explain this last part, but using the algorithm, I mean, he explains it very briefly. So you have to kind of work through it yourself. Using this algorithm, he also computes all the blocks of the graph. And so from that, and the cut vertices are already there. So from this, you can get the block tree of the graph. And all of these things can be done in order m. Okay. So this is a recommended reading. I expect you all to read it. One of the reasons to read this paper is that it's a very short paper. It's just about 4 pages. And especially for our postgraduate students and those students who plan to continue to a master's or PhD, you should really start learning how to read papers. And this would be one of the easiest papers to start reading, right? So it's just 4 pages. And my recommendation would be that you try proving the lemmas on your own. So there are, I mean, I think I'll write down an announcement regarding this. Try proving the lemmas and theorems on your own. Right? So you should read the rest of the paper, but when you hit a lemma or a theorem, you should see how you can prove it on your own. Okay? That's basically how you read a paper. You try proving things on your own. Okay? Good. Are there any questions? We are about to finish connectivity. I'm going to conclude it, and we are going to move on to planarity. So if there are any questions about connectivity, please shoot them now. Okay, no more questions? All right, then this is the end of module 1. Okay, let's move on to module 2, planarity. Perhaps the topic of graph theory that made me want to do graph theory. So let's see if I can invoke the same kind of excitement in you. Okay. So, right. So I might have told you that in some sense, what is really important is the graph. It's not the drawing of the graph, right? I mean, you can draw a graph in many different ways. But this is a subject where the drawing of a graph matters. Okay. So let's start with a simple example. This is the complete graph K4, right? In the last lecture, we discussed what complete graphs are. So this is K4. You see, this drawing is not very pleasing. How would I draw a more pleasing drawing? I don't like these edges crossing. So what is happening in this drawing is there is a point here where two edges cross. I don't like this. Can I get a different drawing of this graph where the edges do not cross? Can anybody tell me how I would get a different drawing of this graph where the edges do not cross?
By connecting 2, 4, and 1 and 3 in the outside of the graph drawn, not
Okay.
intersecting them.
Okay. So let's say I put the cycle like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what do you want me to do? Where should I put 1, 3?
1, 3, you can draw below vertex 4 means.
Oh, I see, like this.
Yeah.
And what about 2, 4?
2, 4. Okay, in that way it will intersect again. Let me
Right.
think about it.
Okay.
Mm.
Can you see any way of joining 2 and 4 without crossing any other
Yeah,
edge?
without crossing, it will be the same as it is.
Right. Right. So you just wanted to put 1, 3 outside, not 2,
Yeah.
4. 2, 4 remains
Yeah.
inside, 1, 3 goes outside. Good.
Yes.
Okay. So this is also the graph K4. This is also the same graph, right? Good. This is what we are going to call a planar drawing. The more formal word which I will be using is planar embedding. Okay, so we will be using planar embedding. And this is not a planar embedding. Okay. Okay, good. Well, in reality, points, the vertices are supposed to be just points, right? It's in reality,
Your
when you
voice is
draw a graph,
breaking.
oh, is the voice breaking for other people?
It's
Yes.
Hi,
okay.
is the voice
Yeah, it was breaking when she said, but now it's okay.
okay? But now it's okay.
Yes.
Okay, Shefali, is it okay for you?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. So let me know if I should repeat anything. Okay. So in reality, the vertices are supposed to be just points, right? They are supposed to be zero-dimensional points in the plane. Okay. And that's why in the formal definition, what we will say is that an embedding of a graph in the plane, right? So we are working in the plane. If you like, you can think of R2. is said to be planar if the edges intersect only at their ends, right? So formally speaking, we have to be very rigorous because we are dealing with a topic that is not actually graph theory. So we are going to be slightly rigorous to discuss that, but we are not going to go into topology. So this topic of graph theory is related to topology. Okay? But I don't expect any of you to have done a course in topology. I myself never did a course in topology. Okay? So what is happening here is that this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So according to this definition, what it's saying is that two edges intersect only at their ends. So 1, 4 and 2, 4, they do intersect, but the only point they intersect is at the vertex 4. And that is of course the case because they both contain the vertex 4. Okay? But they cannot meet at any point other than the ends. Right? So in a simple graph, two edges can meet only at one vertex. Right? And if the graph is not simple, then you could have this situation, right? Where two edges could meet at two vertices. They could intersect at two ends. Okay? Good. Okay, so that is what a planar embedding is. Okay, so that's a planar embedding. And what is a planar graph? A graph G is planar if it admits, if it has a planar embedding. Otherwise, G is not planar or non-planar. Okay? So question. Let's see. Pappu, can you hear me? Vamsi Krishna Valluru, can you hear me? Pappu, can you hear me? Is K4 planar? Is this graph planar? Is this graph planar?
Yes. Yes.
Right, it is. Okay. Because you can make a planar embedding. So although this particular drawing is not planar, you can get an embedding that is planar. Right? Good. Is everybody clear with the definition?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So, here is a question. Are there graphs that are not planar? What do people think? Are there graphs that are not planar? Anyone? Yeah, I couldn't hear.
I mean, they will be right, otherwise we won't be starting it.
Yes, true. Can you give me an example? Do you know of an example? So we looked at K4. What do people
K5?
think about? Yeah, K5. Thanks. So what do people think about K5? So you can try drawing K5 and you will struggle and probably you will come to the conclusion that it is not planar. Okay? How do you prove such a statement? right? Okay, good. So K5 is a non-planar graph, and we will prove it. I don't know if we'll prove it in today's lecture, but we will prove it soon. Okay. Let me just untangle my headphones. It's one of the greatest problems humanity faces. Okay, good. All right. So the main decision problem for this entire module, in fact, I think this is the only decision problem for this module. Given a graph G, decide whether G is planar. So is this problem in NP? So is this decision problem in NP? Can someone answer this? I don't need a rigorous proof, but what is your intuition? Is this problem in NP? Can you convince someone easily that a graph is planar? How would you convince someone easily that a graph is planar?
If you provide a planar embedding, then you can convince the person.
Right, right. You give a planar embedding, right? Yes, because a planar embedding. Okay, so Papu also says yes. Sefali, what do you think? Is that the same answer you had in mind?
Yes, because we can prove that by using its planar, by showing its planar embedding.
Right.
With that, we can know it.
Exactly. So this is actually the correct answer. There is one subtle point that I will come to maybe in the next lecture. Let's see. Maybe I'll talk about it towards the end. So the one subtle point is, so you can give a planar embedding. So intuitively, I agree that this is the completely natural thing to do, right? You give a planar embedding. But why is it possible to check in polynomial time? How would you specify the embedding? So if you want to get into the details, right, how would you specify the embedding? Because remember, we are drawing curved lines, right? So you are drawing these kind of curved lines. So now you actually need to specify the exact trajectory of each segment. So you need to figure out how you specify each line, and then the person should be able to check. So it would be much easier if you can get a straight line drawing. If you can get a straight line drawing, so there is a straight line drawing of this graph. This is also K4. If you can get a straight line drawing, then actually life is much easier, because for each vertex, you just specify the coordinates. Okay? And now any two vertices are going to be joined by a straight line, or they are not going to be joined. So checking whether the straight lines intersect is easy. You can just write some linear equations and check this, right? The problem is you can have curved lines, and that makes it a little bit complicated. Okay? So it's not clear how you would specify the curved lines in polynomial in a manner that is polynomial in the size of the graph, right? It's not immediately obvious. Does everybody see what's going on here?
Yes.
So actually it turns out there is a theorem called Fara's theorem, which we will not be discussing beyond this lecture, and we will not be proving it. There is a theorem called Fara's theorem. Actually, I myself have never read the complete proof of it. It says that if a graph G has a planar drawing, a planar embedding, then G admits a planar embedding in which each edge is a straight line segment. So I would say that to rigorously say that this is an NP, one kind of needs Fari's theorem. Because once you have straight lines, it is very easy to check whether two line segments intersect or not. And you can also specify the line segments. You can specify each vertice's endpoint just by giving the coordinates, right? And so then you can get the edges by just drawing the line segment, right? So I would say that to really rigorously say that this problem is an NP, one kind of needs some result like Fari's theorem. But we are going to intuitively accept the answer yes. And we are not going to go into Fari's theorem. Okay? We are going to focus more on co-NP and P. Is the problem in co-NP? This decision problem, is it in co-NP? If I would not allow you to use any theorems, then what would you think?
Yes.
Why do you say yes?
If a graph does not have a planar embedding, like if at least one subgraph can be proved not to have a planar embedding for a given graph, then we can conclude that the graph in total does not have a planar embedding.
Okay, that's a very good way to go about it.
So
Right.
take for granted that we have some basic graphs that does not have planar
Exactly. So you want something for granted. What if you don't have anything for granted? Then what do you think? What if you cannot use any theorems?
not like a theorem, just some basic graphs in itself, like K5 or beyond.
I see. But no, but there is an important question. So, okay, so what you're saying is, if you know that the graph has a K5, somehow the graph contains a K5, then you can say that the graph is non-planar, right? Okay. But what makes you think that every non-planar graph has to contain a basic graph that is non-planar? Why can't there be infinitely many non-basic? Why can't there be infinitely many basic non-planar graphs? Whatever basic means, right? So what is your thinking? I'm going to write down formally. By the way, who is this? Who's speaking? I can't see the name.
Anand.
Anand. Okay. So Anand is saying that if there are some basic, whatever that means, non-planar graphs such that every non-planar graph contains one basic non-planar graph. Then the decision problem is in NP. Is that right, Anand?
Yes.
Contains at least one basic non-planar graph, right? So this is a bit vague, but this is actually correct. If there was some theorem that told you that every non-planar graph in the world has to contain some basic non-planar graph, maybe K5, then you would know that the decision problem is an NP, because then you would just tell the person that, hey, look, the graph is a K5, right? And then the problem would be an NP. But as I told you, we don't know any such theorem. What if there are infinitely many basic non-planar graphs? Then what do you think, Anand? Is the problem still going to be an NP? What does anybody else think?
If we know the possible ways the basic graphs can be formed,
see.
then we can simply go
Right.
through all the subgraphs.
Right. That's good. So one and very interesting, right? So even this is again doable. So for example, supposing the infinitely many family graphs that are there, we know all of them. Supposing they are all the complete graphs. Supposing this is all hypothetical, okay? What I'm writing right now, these are not facts. These are hypothetical discussions. Supposing all the complete graphs are this family, then again you are done, right? You know all the infinite graphs, you are done. The problem is, what if you don't know these infinitely many graphs? What if they are all somehow strange? You can't somehow figure out a description of these graphs. Okay? So I will erase this because I don't want to make it too confusing. So if we know all of these infinitely many graphs, then again the decision problem would be in NP. Okay? That's right. The problem is, what if we don't know some of these graphs? What if we are not able to find out what these infinitely many graphs are, right? So the point is, unless you go through some kind of argument like this, the problem actually looks to not be in NP immediately, right? So you need some kind of information to conclude that this decision problem is in co-NP. So what I will the summary of this discussion is that we need some information, essentially theorems, to conclude that the decision problem in consideration is in co-NP. It will look to be in co-NP. Let's think about it this way. How do you convince someone that a graph is non-planar? Right? Convincing someone that a graph is planar is easy. You just show them a planar drawing. But how do you convince someone that there is no way to draw a certain graph so that the drawing or the embedding is a planar embedding? In other words, no matter how you draw this graph, you will always have two edges crossing at a point that is not an end of the edges, right? You will have a crossing, right? So there are infinitely many ways of drawing a graph, right? So just here we have three different ways of drawing K4. But of course, you can get many different ways of drawing K4 by just making the lines curvy or whatever. Like, what about this? Why can't I draw weird kind of line segments and avoid the crossings, right? Okay. So good. So what you are discussing, what you are saying is actually the context of Krutowski's theorem. This we will be studying very soon. So we will be studying Krutowski's theorem maybe in the next 1 or 2 lectures. And that addresses this problem. But we will not be proving Krutowski's theorem in this course. Coming up soon. Okay? And Krutowski's theorem will tell us that the problem is in co-NP. Okay? Okay? Good. So by now it should be clear that if you want to study planar graphs, you must understand the properties of the plane. Okay? Because we want to draw the graph on the plane. And so that means that you need to understand certain properties of the plane. Okay? So there are two main things we are going to discuss. The first one is called the Jordan curve theorem. This is a result from topology. Okay. All right. Let me think about how I want to proceed. Okay, maybe I'll just tell you what Jordan curve theorem is. So the Jordan curve theorem says that if you draw a curve in the plane, let me draw it better. If you draw any, okay, so this is supposed to meet here. If you draw any curve in the plane, so actually it is a closed curve because it comes back to the first point. So this, for example, would be an open curve. But if I bring it back to the first point, then it is a closed curve. Okay? So it is a closed curve. Another property of this curve I have drawn is that it does not intersect itself. For example, this is intersecting itself. So this is going to be called a closed curve that is simple. This is not simple. Okay? So simple in this case means the curve does not intersect itself. Okay? Maybe I'll just put the example. This is not simple. So what Jordan curve theorem says is that if you have a closed curve in the plane, a simple closed curve, then what it does is it partitions the plane into two parts, the interior and the exterior. So if this is my curve C, then the inside is going to be called the interior of the curve, and the outside is going to be called the exterior of the curve. And the theorem says that if you want to go from the interior to the exterior, if you pick some point in the interior and you pick some point in the exterior, and if you want to go from the inside point to the outside point, then you will have to cross the curve. No matter how you go from the inside to the outside, you will always have to cross the curve. Right? You can do whatever you like, but if you want to go outside and meet that point, you must cross the curve. Okay? Now, let's see. We have 3 more minutes. I'm going to write down the theorem statement, and then I'm going to tell you a story. So the Jordan curve theorem is the following. Any simple closed curve C in the plane partitions the rest of the plane. Remember, we are removing the curve and then we are partitioning the rest of the plane. So this means plane minus the curve C into two disjoint arc-wise connected. I will explain this term in the next lecture, or let's see if I have time right now. Arc-wise connected, I need to explain this to you. Open sets. Okay? So what does arc-wise connected means? Arc-wise connected means that if you look at the exterior, so this is the exterior, right? If you look at the exterior, any 2 points in the exterior can be joined without going through the curve, right? No matter where they are, you can take a point here, you can take a point here, and you can go from here to there. So the exterior is arc-wise connected. In the same sense, the interior is arc-wise connected. You can take any 2 points wherever you like, and you will be able to join them without going through the curve or without going through the outside of the curve. Okay, so this is what arc-wise connected means. And open means, why are these open sets? Can anybody tell me why are these open sets? If you have taken a course in analysis or even calculus might teach what an open set is. Can someone tell me what an open set is? I'll give you an example. 1, 2 versus 1, 2. Which one is an open set?
The second one.
The second one is
Second
an
one.
open set. Exactly. This is an open set. This is a closed set. In the same sense, if you remove the curve from the plane, then the two parts you will get, the interior and the exterior, they are open sets because the curve is the boundary and that has been removed from it. So actually an open set does not have a boundary. It does not have a well-defined boundary. Right? You can keep going as close to the boundary as possible. For every epsilon, you can get epsilon close to the boundary. If I wanted to make everything super rigorous, then you would have to use epsilon delta kind of stuff, right? But hopefully the intuitive idea is clear why these are open sets, right? So the interior of the curve and the exterior of the curve, both of these are open sets. Okay? And they are arc-wise connected. And they are also arc-wise connected. So we have already reached the time limit. I'm going to tell you a quick short story, and I'll probably So yeah, so we'll discuss from here tomorrow. And the quick short story is as follows. When I first saw Jordan curve theorem in my PhD, in my master's actually, in Georgia Tech, the professor, Robin Thomas, I asked him, why wasn't this obvious? Why did this need a proof? And all the math students started laughing. So this was a math course. And the CS students, most of them, they kind of empathized with me. They were like, yeah, I am glad you asked this question. And then Robin went to the board and explained why the theorem needs a proof. And today I am convinced that the theorem needs a proof. Although it looks intuitive, the theorem definitely needs a proof. And the reason for that is that the curves can be very complicated. There are these curves called space filling curves. So if you want, you can go and read about it. And when you see a space filling curve, you really start wondering how one can prove the Jordan curve theorem. So the Jordan curve theorem definitely needs a proof once you see things like space filling curves. But in this course, we will not be proving it. In this course, we will not prove the Jordan curve theorem. Okay, we will assume it. And in exercise for tomorrow is see if you can prove that K5 is non-planar using the Jordan curve theorem and some other arguments. Okay. And if you have more time, you can also think about why K33 is non-planar. K33 is the following graph. Okay, so that's it for today. We'll continue tomorrow. And I will be here for another 10-15 minutes. So please ask questions. If the statement of the Jordan curve theorem is not clear, then please ask me about that so that we can clarify all the details.
So for Jordan curve theorem, does analogous statements hold good in higher dimensions? For example, in 3 dimension, do they exist a closed surface?
Right. So you're right. So there are generalizations of Jordan curve theorem. Let me think about this. So I'm not an expert on this topic. I'm not a topologist. So what I'll say is the following. So the question to ask is rather than higher dimensions, I think the point is other surfaces. So
Yeah.
the plane is one surface, right? The plane is a surface. So your question is, what about other surfaces? So I will give you an example where it does not hold, and I will have to read more about where it holds. I don't know of any other surface where exactly Jordan curve theorem holds. Maybe there are analogous statements, but I'll give you one example. One possible surface is a donut. Okay. So in a donut, let me think about it. If you take a donut, then if you draw a curve on a donut, so the donut is called a torus in mathematics, right? So I mean, this is all extra discussion. So this is all out of syllabus discussion. So there are other surfaces like the torus, right? And torus basically looks like a donut or like a vada, if you may, right? And in a donut, what you can do is you can draw a curve. Let me think about this. I'm not very good at imagining these things. You can draw a curve in a donut which does not break the surface into two parts. So the surface will still remain connected. What happens in the plane is when you draw a closed curve, it breaks into two parts, the interior and the exterior. And that does not always happen in a donut. Okay? So think about it. In a torus,
If you cut a concentric circle
exactly.
through the middle.
Exactly. So you can draw curves, closed curves, simple closed curves that do not partition the surface, the rest of the surface. Okay? But whether there are generalizations of Jordan curve theorem, I'll have to read about it. Yeah?
Okay, sir.
So there is a subject called topological graph theory. So if you like planarity, then there is a subject called topological graph theory, which not only studies graph drawings on the plane, but studies in-depth graph drawings on different surfaces. And there is a lot of literature on topological graph theory. There are multitudes of books written on the subject. Okay, so it's a very fascinating subject, but I'm not an expert in that subject. I'm really a structural graph theorist. Thanks. Any other questions?
Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello. Is there any?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Is there any theorem that count the number of planar drawing of a planar graph?
I see. That is a very interesting question. So again, this is so can you count the number of planar drawings? Can you count the number of planar drawings? So that is actually very interesting because the thing is, what does it mean? When do you say that two drawings are different? For example, if I give you this drawing, let me actually give you a better example. Supposing I give you this graph. Okay. And then I give you another drawing of this graph. What I will do is I will just make the lines curved. right? And then I give you a different drawing of this graph. Okay? So which ones are different drawings really? We need to make this precise, because if we count these two as different drawings, if we count this one and this one as different drawings, then clearly there is infinitely many ways of drawing, right? You agree? Do you see my point?
Yeah.
So if we consider these to be different, then the answer is basically infinite, right? So we have to have some better definition of what does it mean for two drawings to be the same or different. And that brings us to the notion of combinatorially different drawings. Combinatorially different drawings. And so these two are not going to be considered combinatorially different, because all I have done is I have just made some lines curved, right? The actual structure has not changed. So what you can do is you can label the vertices. Let's see. And now what you can do is you can look at the faces of the drawing. What is a face? I will make this all definitions rigorous in the next few lectures. So this is one face, F1. This is F2. This is F3. This is F4. Now, if you look at the faces, then each face has a boundary that looks like a cycle in this drawing. But if you look at the faces in this graph, the faces will be different. So I'll give you an example. So if you look at F2 here, F2 is a 4 cycle. Here, F2 is a 5 cycle. In this case, what you have is you have two faces that are of length 3, F1 and F3. They are bounded by triangles. And there are two faces of length 5. In this example, there are two faces of length 3, and there are two faces of length 4 and 6. This is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the outside is 6. Okay? And so that means that these two drawings are combinatorially different. 1 and 3. So 1 and 2 are same. And 1 and 3 are combinatorially different. Does that make sense? Do you follow me so far?
Yeah.
Right. So now we have a definition of what it means for two drawings to be different. And according to this definition, now you can study the problem. So there are results on this. I don't know if there is any formula, but there are structural results. What it tells you is that under certain conditions, you can go from one drawing to another drawing. Whether you can get a formula, I will have to read about this. I think there is a formula. Yeah, I will have to read more about this. My intuition says that there is some way to get a formula, or at least get an upper bound or lower bound on the number of drawings, a non-trivial upper bound or lower bound. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Good. So I have a lot of things to read about and report back to all of you. Any other questions?
Hello.
Yeah.
So
Let me
does
see,
every
yes.
graph admit a R3 embedding?
Oh, R3 embedding. Yes, that is true. Again, I'm going to put it in the out of syllabus part. Yes, that is actually a known result. Every graph admits an embedding in R3. I have read the proof at some point, but I don't recall how one goes about it. It's not supposed to be difficult. It is supposed to be quite straightforward. Yes. Yes, this is a theorem.
So
Yeah.
you don't have any space filling curves in R3?
No, there are space filling curves in R3. I don't think that is a problem. Yeah, the point of space filling curves was to justify why Krutowski's theorem needs a proof. From whatever I understand, there are space filling curves in R3. But again, I'm not an expert on topology, so take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to Google about these things once we finish the lecture.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But the point is that despite there being space filling curves, to the best of my knowledge, you can embed every graph in R3 without crossings. So I think I should make it more clear, without such that edges meet, edges intersect only at their ends. Okay? Good. Any other questions?